yes,
too.
I every year when the ACC announces their schedule, yes, I admit there's part of me that gets some goosebumps.
Mm-hmm.
But Mark, I don't know if you want to pull up the page. Obviously, what the ACC did yesterday was they finally announced the matchups for the 3-5-5. The way it's going to work out, Florida State gets 3 teams that they will play for the next 4 years. They'll play them every single season. As we look right now, Florida State will play Miami, which that was a given that Florida State is going to play Miami every year. And then they get Clemson. And then the surprise move for some, and I feel there's some of the fan base that are upset about this one, Florida State got Syracuse. And obviously, Mike Alford, the athletic director, said he wanted a presence in the Northeast. I talked to some people within the ACC. Basically, what they did was Florida State is always going to play Miami. That's always going to happen until the day the apocalypse comes. Florida State and Miami will play every single season. That's the way it's going to happen. Florida State got Clemson as one of their top 3 because right now, with all due respect to Miami, the sexiest game in the ACC, TV coverage-wise, money coverage-wise, is Clemson, Florida State. So they want Clemson and Florida State to play every single year. If you take a look at the way everything breaks down with the way the teams are given 3, for the most part, you're given your rival. You're given either 2 middle-of-the-road teams in the ACC. Like, for example, if we take a look at Miami. Miami is given Boston College and Louisville, who right now you would say kind of middle of the road in the ACC. I think Louisville's decent. Boston College is decent, but they're kind of like 500, a little better than 500 teams. Florida State was given Clemson for obvious TV reasons, for obvious money game reasons. So they said, okay, we have to give you kind of a team that's at the lower end of the conference. And since Florida State had asked for a Northeast team, in comes Syracuse. So for the next 4 seasons, Florida State will play Clemson, Miami, and Syracuse. Now, before everyone loses their mind about it, like I said, there were a lot of fans that wanted Florida State to play Georgia Tech and have Georgia Tech be one of the teams because that's the closest ACC school to Tallahassee, to the Florida State campus. Danny Cannell on his radio show, former Florida State quarterback, talked about today. Florida State did not call me back on this one. I did talk to people at the University of Miami. The way it's looking right now is that this is just a 4-year thing. That 4 years from now, for the 2027 through 2030 season, 2 of those teams could change. It would be Florida State, Miami always, and then it may be Georgia Tech and Boston College. It may be Boston College and Virginia. It may be Syracuse and Georgia Tech. We don't know at that point. So that's why, while I would like to have seen Florida State play Georgia Tech as opposed to Syracuse, it's not the end of the world to me. It's also not the end of the world when you look at the way the schedule plays out for next season, because take a look at what Florida State will play next season. If you look at their teams, and I'm just going to look at the paper right here. Instead of Florida State having to play NC State and Louisville at home, who Florida State has not beaten either one of those teams since the 2019 season, Florida State next season will get Virginia Tech and Duke at home, as well as Syracuse and Miami. So you say you're replacing Virginia Tech with replacing NC State with Virginia Tech. I don't mind that because I think NC State is a better team than Virginia Tech right now. Virginia Tech's a good team, but I think NC State's better. And you're replacing Louisville with Duke. To me, that's a win for Florida State. That's an easier home slate in the ACC. And as far as the road games next season, Florida State will play at Wake Forest, at Clemson, at Boston College, who they already were playing. That was already the Atlantic Division game, so there's no change in that schedule. And then they'll play at Pitt. Now, obviously, the last time those 2 teams played in 2020, Pitt schooled us in Tallahassee. Last time we played at Pittsburgh, we schooled the hell out of them in Jameson's coming out game in 2013. So I think on the surface, once you get past the whole Florida State not playing Georgia Tech every year, and by the way, the way the schedule plays out, Florida State and Georgia Tech will play 3 of the next 5 seasons because Florida State will play them. As I take a look at my papers real quick, in 2024, in Atlanta they will play, and then in 2026, Georgia Tech comes back to Tallahassee. So 3 out of the next 5 seasons, those 2 teams will play. Is it as bad as what other teams have? No. I think Miami is in a rough spot when you take a look at what their 2023 schedule looks like as opposed to ours. So I think on the surface, yeah, a trip to Syracuse is not the greatest idea in the world. But in the scheme of things, I think Florida State came out a winner the way the schedule plays out.
I think we're good until 2026. That 2026 schedule is a doozy. It has Notre Dame, Miami, Florida, Alabama, and Clemson.
But
All right.
James, if I can interrupt you for just 1 second, I apologize. Miami fans were all riding on me for that one, saying, "Oh, you've got a tough schedule in 2026, tough schedule in 2026." That schedule was already set. Notre Dame,
Well,
Florida,
yeah.
Alabama are the non-conference games, and Clemson and Miami. Nothing changes. That's the thing. Our three opponents of Syracuse, Miami, and Clemson have always been on our schedule.
Right.
So that's why, to me, it's not.
It's just some of the other things too that are in
Right.
there, and Louisville's recruiting really well right now. So a lot of those guys will. So I believe Louisville will be much better. But that's par for the course. I really think what you said earlier in all of this, Jason, was a very valid point, because when you look at what the landscape of college football, and this is why they couldn't go past X amount of years, I really think that either Florida State, Clemson are going to force and I'll say Miami too, are going to force the hand of the ACC to really get into true negotiations, bring in some better teams, and either poach from the Big 12, or I think you're going to see us three, though Florida State, Clemson, and Miami, figure out how to get out of the ACC. And I think when you look at what the SEC and the Big Ten are trying to do, obviously it's not going to happen in the SEC. I don't care what anybody says. Florida has no intentions of us joining the SEC. And that myth of Florida State being afraid or Bobby being afraid, I think we've put that to rest on this show. I think one year Bobby played maybe 4 or 5 teams from the SEC and won all but one game. Like he's got he had a tremendous record against the SEC. Probably should have played them more often. But even when you don't count Florida. But I think if the Big Ten were trying to really, as the SEC has expanded into Texas, bringing in Texas and Oklahoma, and already has Texas A&M, the Big Ten, what they're missing is a true presence in the South. And if you go and you can bring in Clemson, which gets you into South Carolina, which is right around the corner from Atlanta, even if they brought in Georgia, they wanted to bring in 4 teams and brought Georgia Tech in just to have that Atlanta market, that wouldn't be bad. But Tallahassee and Miami will get you the entire state of Florida. Now, all these expansions do is help your recruiting presence spread out. Because what do Florida kids want to do more than everybody wants to leave, but people want their mama to be able to see them play. So, can I come to Florida twice a year, or can I come to the South twice a year? If you can make that happen on the schedule, that makes it good. And then when you think about, again, I know this is projecting, but when you think about Michigan, Florida State, and you go back to when you saw it in the 90s, Florida State, Ohio State, whether it's in a horseshoe or whether it's in Tallahassee, Penn State, Florida State, these fan bases that travel so much, the amount of money just from a local perspective that will now bring to those couple programs, I think would be crazy. I mean, would be tremendous, as well as increasing the athleticism. Because what they have to do on a national level, like, they have the linemen, they just don't have the skill players like that consistently. But now you can truly go in and have a presence in those hotbeds. I think they would do it, because right now we're getting lapped by the Vanderbilts, Miami too. So this ain't just a Florida State thing. It is not, because from a football perspective, a pure fiscal perspective, if the SEC continues to do what they're doing, Vanderbilt will get a tremendous amount of money just by being associated with that. So, yeah, I mean that's all I gotta really say about that part.
I guess my one issue, if I come back to that one, I understand what you're saying. For the ACC, though, if you're saying the ACC would take, like, let's say some teams from the Big 12, using your example you just said. I mean, honestly, Texas and Oklahoma were the sexiest names, and they're going to the SEC. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, who would Florida State? Who would the ACC go after? West Virginia?
West Virginia, Oklahoma State.
Teams nowhere near the Atlantic coast. Got it. Okay.
Well, where's UCF in comparison to the Big 12? I know. Where's Missouri in comparison to the rest of the SEC? It's just one of those things. The same thing with the Big 10. I know for a fact Columbus, Ohio is a 16-hour drive from Tallahassee, Florida. The only reason I know is because my dad lives in Columbus, Ohio, and he came and picked me up when I was going into 6th grade, and that is not a fun car ride with a man that you barely know. Like you don't want to be in there that long. But and it's again, it's really the conferences are really just they can call it whatever now. They might as well call it the semi-pro NFL NFC East or Midwest. I mean, the conference is just a name that people recognize and things of that nature. This is about regional chopping up the pot, regional pot. The reason why Notre Dame is affiliated with the ACC right now isn't because we really care about Notre Dame. It's because we want the Chicago market. The reason why Syracuse is involved and Boston College is two of the top TV markets are in there. And the more TV markets you have, the more money that you have. So for the Big Ten, or even us, now West Virginia doesn't do anything for us, but getting us more into the Midwest would help. It's just something that they got to do from a fiscal perspective. I really don't care how they do it. I just don't like the fact that Vanderbilt makes more money in athletics than Florida State right now. It bothers me because they're not. Now, if you want to talk about academic stuff, I don't know. I didn't go to school to play academics. I went to play football. But I know from a sports perspective, it definitely throws me off. But you're right. But to your other point about the schedule, if Mike can figure it out this year and then make it a little bit better next year, you got a 24-25 window where the schedule's kind of pie for the first time in a while. And it's just, but that's been the Florida State mantra for the last 5 years. If they can figure it out, we can just win. Things will be okay.